Hi, I'm Makena Janssen. I haven't met Katie in person, but we've become friends via CalArts grad school. And today I'm going to talk about grief and how our society doesn't really know what to do with it. Um, I guess I'll start with like my personal story. My dad passed away on Christmas Eve last year in a sudden biking accident. He was hit by a car, and that type of like drastic face with death has like completely changed my life and my like understanding. And like when Katie asked what I was going to talk about today, there's like really no way I can view anything happening in my life without looking through that lens. So I guess that's why I chose it as a topic. And I guess when I was thinking about what I wanted to say, I thought it would be good to share kind of like the big things that I've learned through this experience, because I think that there's so many people going through grief, especially now, like in this time where grief is like really not just about like losing a person. Like there's so many different types of grief. Like coronavirus is grieving, we're like grieving the life we used to live, and there's like losses of dreams and losses of like hope, and all of those are types of grief. But I guess like I hope that like by talking about it more, like our society can learn how to learn truly how to grieve. Yeah, I guess the biggest thing I've learned is that grief and depression are like nowhere near the same thing. Like depression is actually like not feeling, and grief is like feeling fully, and like there's something so beautiful in that, and that was like really transformative for me when I realized that. I guess also the biggest thing that like I hope that other people grieving like realize is that they like talk about the like steps of grief, like denial, anger. I think they call it bartering or bargaining, where you try to like convince that it's not real or find a way out of it. Those different steps, I had to realize that like they're not linear. Like I remember at first thinking, I was like, oh, so now I'm in anger. I was like, okay, now I'm in the anger phase. And then suddenly you're like thrown back into denial months later, and you're like, wait, what? So I guess realizing that that's not a linear process was like huge for me to
Yeah.
experience.
Oh my goodness. There's a lot of different directions we can go. Maybe not linearly. Um, I guess the first thing is, do you want to talk about there is kind of this societal taboo about grief where, we all, like you said, we all go through grief in different ways, different stages, different responses to things, but we don't, as a society, at least in Western society, seem to have an okay relationship with grief. So what do you kind of think about that? What's your take on that?
Yeah. I think as a society, we're kind of taught to not feel and not cry in public, and not go there. Like it is a place you have to choose to go in yourself. And we're taught that we only have set amounts of time to do that. Like you go to therapy to do that work, and like that's totally a necessary place to go for that, but it's also, it can't be like capitalized. Like we can't have this one place and dedicate this one time and then you're going to get through it in this set definite amount of time, because it doesn't work like that. And I think we're also taught that like negative feelings are like not okay, and as they're not as valued or productive. And I would say that like that's been like one of the biggest setbacks for our society, is we have like these generational traumas caused by people suppressing grief, and that it does live on generationally and it gets passed down. um, yeah, I listened to this amazing talk that like really has shaped my whole understanding of this, and it's called Grief and Praise. And I think like the beauty of that idea is that grief and praise are really the same thing. Like when you're grieving, you're expressing the fullest amount of love for something you've lost. And when you're praising, you're expressing the fullest amount of love for what you have. And I think that's just like the most beautiful way to live. Like if every day you can live like fully crying, fully feeling, and also fully like crying for happiness and like laughing in what you do have. So it's grief and praise.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful thought, and such an incredible kind of like reframing of this, I guess, like darker emotion is something that is rooted in beauty. Have you read anything else that's like helped you through your process?
Yeah, let me grab it and show the title. So I started reading, I haven't finished it, but
Yes,
When Things Fall Apart.
my
Yeah,
therapist had me read that last year.
really? Yeah, really beautiful. I'm trying to think what else I've read. Oh, she's also from Maui, but there's this amazing writer called Lily Diamond, and everyone should check her out. She writes a lot about grief, and she actually just posted on her Instagram like this checklist for like what to do when someone dies. And I thought it was so nice to see like concrete steps for this really like shattering explosion event, because like that's something my family had to do. Like the week or two afterwards, it was like this chaotic. I remember we had those like, you know, those yellow pads of paper. We had like 8 of them like around our living room with like lists of like cards to cancel, like a bunch of like logistics to figure out. And like seeing this author Lily write about that in like a tangible concrete way was honestly like really reassuring and like hopeful that I'll know what to do like when someone I know goes through that.
Yeah, and it's nice to have. It's interesting when you said that because I wasn't imagining what you ended up saying. Because when I think of, like checklist for grief, you can, yeah, on the one end you have like checklist of what to do when a person dies from a logistical, capitalistic, societal way, and then you have a checklist of things to do internally for your emotional well-being, and
Yeah,
that second checklist might not be linear. It might be things that take years. It might be things that you have to do again and again to check in on yourself, and um,
yeah,
it is nice to break this large kind of unknowable scary thing down into relatable pieces, I guess.
yeah, it really is. And I guess like the like self checklist of like what to do with your feelings when you're feeling all of these things, I think that's also been like a huge learning curve for me, is I've had to learn how to like ask people for help, and like that's not been like natural to me. And like I've learned like brutal honesty. Like there's like no way to censor
Yeah,
when something like that happens, where it's just like you can't have any sort of veils anymore. You're like, life and death is happening here and now. Like I'm not going to bullshit anything, you know? Like you just have to talk the way you feel. And I think learning to do that has been an important part of my like emotional checklist going forward, is doing that and like learning like truly about self-care. Like when I need to like go for a walk, I go for a walk, you know. There's no like, oh, something else is more important. Like it's not. You could die anytime, which is like crazy when that's suddenly made real to you,
right.
which I'm sure like what you were telling me earlier, how when you've had like a near death experience, and I don't mean like you dying, I just mean being near death, you know, like that it makes that, it levels that
Yeah,
so much closer. Then I feel like most of the time we're living like this, where it's like, oh, here's life, here's death, really far away. And like suddenly they're like at the same level. And it's like every moment you have to live like that.
yeah. And I think these kind of like deeper philosophical questions end up kind of cropping up in those ways, and you have to live life differently. But this is an awful place to cut off this conversation. A long time conversation, but thank you for being here and talking about
Totally.
these things with me.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for letting us go there.
It's important. It's really, especially right now, it's like one of the most important things to talk about.
I think so. Yeah. Cool.